Collecting hair follicles is by far, and we've tested out those and many, many other strategies, even filtering urine for endothelial cells, right? Everything. Through simple plucking, we can access mesenchymal stem cells from a patient. The hair follicle is the most accessible source of high-quality stem cells, period.
Imagine this. The 25-year-old version of you still exists alive and well, in a cryotank somewhere, waiting for the day science figures out how to make you young again. Sounds like science fiction, right? Well, today's guest is living proof that it's more like science fact in progress. Our guest today, Dr. Drew Taylor, has one foot in the lab and the other firmly planted in the future, where your healthiest cells could one day be your body's own repair kit.
If you think about it, this is a biologic health insurance policy. You're taking a copy of you at your best, and we're locking it in time. And so part of you will be on ice. And so if you're excited about the future of regenerative medicine and what's coming next, it makes a lot of sense not only to do this for yourself, but to spread that message and make sure your loved ones are also saving their cells.
Hi, my name is Chris Burris. I'm a longevity expert and the chief scientist at a lab focused on a longevity molecule. My primary focus is to help people live longer and better lives with science. Make sure to subscribe and share so you and your friends can live longer and better, so you and your friends can live beyond the norms.
Hi, and welcome to the next episode of the Live Beyond the Norms Health and Longevity Podcast. Imagine this. The 25-year-old version of you still exists alive and well, in a cryotank somewhere, waiting for the day science figures out how to make you young again. Sounds like science fiction, right? Well, today's guest is living proof that it's more like science fact in progress. Our guest today, Dr. Drew Taylor, has one foot in the lab and the other firmly planted in the future, where your healthiest cells could one day be your body's own repair kit. I've already visited the cryogenic facility in Toronto, and he already has my stem cells. With a PhD in biomedical engineering and a past life as a professional baseball player, Drew traded the bullpen for the biobank, turning his competitive spirit into a mission to help people capture their youthful cellular potential before time takes it away. Dr. Taylor's approach is proactive, not reactive. Instead of waiting for medicine to fix what's broken, he's helping us safeguard what's still pristine. Think of his technology like a Back to the Future DeLorean for your body. Today we'll dive into how close this future really is, what it could mean for aging, and why one day your best investment might just be in yourself, literally in your body. Today, Dr. Taylor, thank you so much for joining us today.
No, Chris, thank you so much for having me on. Excited to chat. That was quite the introduction.
So before we jump into your area of expertise, I want to go further back, like much further back. What was it like growing up, little Drew? Where did you grow up? What were your parents like? And if there was some event or someone you could pinpoint as the reason you would ultimately become, a doctor in biomedical engineering and a keeper of people's longevity, what or who would that be?
Yeah, that's a good question, and I can't say it's any one person. There's definitely been a number of amazing people that have had significant influence on my life and my career path. I definitely started with dad and mom. My dad was a physician, mom was a nurse. They actually worked together and ran a family practice here in Toronto. My dad was also a sports medicine physician and was actually the team doctor for the Toronto Blue Jays. So, and then in a past life, he was a professional baseball player. So he actually played 11 years in the major leagues. And so I grew up in a household full of baseball and medicine. And so there was one other sibling. I have a brother that's, just over a year younger than me. So pretty close in age. And we reacted to that very, very different ways. In fact, when my brother and I both had a chance to go in and witness a surgery, pretty exciting opportunity, I left that day saying, this is what I want to do with my life. I want to do medicine, this, absolutely. And specifically even orthopedics at the time. And my brother got back home and my dad asked, well, what did you think? And he said, I'm thinking lawyer. So very, very different reactions. I gravitated towards medicine and baseball, and my brother ended up going in a different direction with equal passion. But it was was definitely like the home influence right from the get-go. So I had a path in baseball and healthcare from when I was a little kid, and that's what I wanted to do.
Sometimes there's little nuggets, right? Because what you're focused on now is stem cells, right? For like first, cryobanking stem cells, and then also working on developing the technologies that the valuable technologies that those stem cells could be used in. Any hints like longevity as you think back growing up?
Yeah, I mean, it was at that time. It wasn't really words like longevity. That wasn't really thrown around. In fact, if anything, it had a negative connotation to it, right? Like you wanted to definitely have live a long, ripe old age, and you wanted to be healthy, but longevity and the pursuit of longevity, I don't know, was at the forefront of most people's minds, or was even this intact thing. For me, though, my passion was actually to go into surgery. I was planning on becoming a surgeon, and I was going to do orthopedics or plastics, and that was kind of my trajectory. And I got all the way through undergrad, and was playing baseball at the University of Michigan. Got through undergrad, worked hard, and got my.
Talk a little bit about that, right? So like I know my dad played football in college, and he remembers like this direct conflicts between education and sports that he was uncomfortable with. I kind of disillusioned him about the sport. Talk a little bit about any of those experiences as you were getting your education and participating in collegiate sports.
I wouldn't say I had the same experience. For sure, there were professors that were more understanding of your travel schedule. Competing on the school's behalf, and that was some professors valued that more than others, and were a little bit more understanding of the time away. But really, I mean, it was just a scale of how accommodating they would be to help you with class notes or the lecture notes and things like that, so that the classes that you missed while you were, off playing Ohio State, that weekend or during the week, you wouldn't miss anything. But as long as you had people in class that you could kind of rely on, you could pretty much accomplish those things without the professor.
Well, and your coursework was probably different than a lot of your athletic mates, right? Like they were studying kind of more the traditional things that athletes study, and you were actually pursuing medicine. Any comparison? Were you the geek in the locker room?
I would definitely say I was very, very far on one extreme of the geek scale. That being said, University of Michigan is a phenomenal school academically, and it actually draws a lot of athletes that have passions in academia as well. And so I ended up having a number of teammates that have had phenomenal careers in different things, right? Like, one's become a lawyer and business leaders, and there's one other doctor, Kyle Boehm, who actually was a roommate of mine. So him and I chummed along together because we had a lot of course overlap. And anyway, he's now practicing medicine in the U.S. and I believe in Wisconsin, and was a great friend during that time, both on the field and off. So I was lucky that I was surrounded by a lot of people. I was definitely, though, very much on the nerdy spectrum. I ended up working pretty hard at school, and ended up getting my undergrad and a master's done. And so when I was doing the master's in my last year playing for Michigan, I was teaching a class. It was like the intro biology, like a 100 level biology class. And so a bunch of my teammates jumped into the class to get their biology requirement fulfilled. So I ended up teaching some of my teammates, which was an interesting. They knew where to find me if they wanted to complain about their grades.
I often joke, my dad was my coach, and I often joke that I didn't get any special treatment as my dad coaching me in soccer. Well, none of the treatment that I actually wanted. That's how it worked out. So I have this interesting question, because it's, everyone has like random facts. What is the number one thing that you could do in order to help your child be a baseball player? A professional baseball player?
The number one thing, I mean, for me, it's so paramount to stay healthy, right? And there's a lot of different things you can do around that. But my career ended with an arm injury, and so I'm acutely aware of that. And it's in baseball, it is a bit of a war of attrition on just survivorship, right? And making sure that you have a long career, because you will get injured at some point, and you will be told at some point that unfortunately you can't play. Very, very few people, only the top all-stars, actually retire on their own terms. Yeah. Everybody else gets told at some point, it's time to wind it down. I was told earlier than I wanted, but
I want to get into your injury, but and you'll appreciate this. If you want your son to be a professional baseball player, the best thing you could possibly do is be a professional baseball player.
That's good. I think so. I think the one thing that I would say my mom and dad did for me was they let me love baseball on my terms, right? Yeah. And so it wasn't something that they pushed upon me, even though my father was this phenomenal professional athlete and baseball player, and has just had a remarkable career. It wasn't pushed on me. They let me embrace baseball on my own terms and fall in love with it. And it never felt like a chore or work or something that I had to perform at. It felt like something that I could do that I loved, and that's important. So I think that's a big thing, because you definitely see some kids get pushed into things, and unfortunately it turns it from a passion into a chore. And for me, I was lucky that wasn't the case.
That's very cool. Yeah, I love that stat. And in my case, I didn't find out that my dad had an offer to Canadian professional football until I was like 14. And I was like, even then, without that little snippet, that fact that I had, I was like, that would have been useful. Like maybe I would have pushed myself harder, because your parents set a ceiling for you, whether you realize it or not. And in your case, the ceiling was professional baseball, and that keeps things wide open. Anyway, I love that fact. Let's get in. All right. So you sustained this injury. You were talking about that a little bit. It kind of maps a little bit of your path to Acorn Biolabs. Talk about that injury, its impact, and how you ended up where you are today.
Yeah. So I was going to, like I said, head off to medical school. That was the plan. I simultaneously, as I was leaving Michigan, I was going to stay and play or go to med school, or I also got offered a chance to sign with Toronto and the Blue Jays. And so that was something that I was obviously pursuing and wanted to do. So I ended up doing that and deferring medical school. I went and met with the dean first, and I actually asked if it would be possible to somehow pull off med school and baseball at the same time. And of course, that wasn't as great of an idea as I thought it was.
There's a thing called sleep.
Yeah, it was very quickly turned down. That being said, though, I think that what he did do is appreciate what I was trying to accomplish, and so worked with me to suggest transferring over to a PhD program. And that would be a lot more flexible. I wouldn't have to do the whole like patient training and things. It's actually very much driven on your own schedule and your own learning course. And so I did do that. I ended up starting a PhD. I did it at University of Toronto because I thought that made sense. And actually, they were very accommodating with balancing both baseball and that course load as well. And so there's some tough days of travel back and forth, for exams and things like that. But it worked out great. I was able to start to work towards my PhD. Signed with the Blue Jays. Played in the minor leagues for a few years with them. Unfortunately, the arm injury did kind of catch up to me. Happened earlier, but there was a kind of a slow progression of its ultimate demise of my career. But I tried one more spring training with Philadelphia to see if I could bounce back from the injury, and it was nice. The Phillies gave me a shot one last time, but didn't really have the same zip on my fastball anymore. And of course, when you're getting to that level, these guys jump on any weakness. And so I think that little bit of movement, that zip was gone. And so the writing was on the wall. Good news was I was well into my PhD, so I got to come back home to Toronto, finish up my PhD, and then decide on what to do next. While I was doing that, I worked for a while after the PhD in the division of orthopedics here in Toronto in Mount Sinai. We ended up having some really interesting projects that I took from my PhD and carried through that work, and then got an offer from a venture capital firm that asked if I'd join and essentially lead diligence for the group. So I ended up inevitably serving as their chief science officer. Was part of diligence on about 28 deals that we made into the healthcare landscape, and it was a great opportunity for me to really learn the other side of the table, so to speak, right? How to operate a business, what makes a good company great, what makes a great company fail, what's the makeup of some of these founders founders that really seem to have success and the tenacity that's needed to take something from 0 to 1. And so that was a phenomenal education. And while I was there, ended up getting together with a couple of younger scientists that had reached out, that had been carrying on some of the work that I had done previously, and looking at opportunities in very similar spaces around preserving and leveraging a patient's own cells for regenerative medicine. And we started to collaborate. I mentored them for about a year, and then we actually made some big leaps forward in technology that we thought was translatable into a commercial path. So we patented it, spun it out, and founded Acorn Biolabs. Both of those individuals ended up staying in academia afterwards. They came and helped get the company off the ground, but both of one returned to teaching and one returned to their PhD. And so I ended up starting to continue the company and build really the dream team around commercializing this. And so it's been a fun run, and I'm excited to say that we are now available in over 150 locations coast to coast now, and growing.
And serving some pretty famous people, right? Like I've seen on social media and stuff. That's pretty awesome. Couple questions. First one, you mentioned kind of 28 deals. Like, I'm also a business guy. I'm fascinated. Are they, a lot of them, still up and running? Did they work out? Like, do you keep tabs on them in any way? It has to be
these are early stage investments, right? So they're, like, some of them are still running, right? And it's to be determined where they are. And then of the ones that have kind of reached a level of maturity, we have a number of exits. We have a number of go publics. We've got some that did not make it as well. And some of the ones that did not make it were some of the ones that we thought were a hell of a shot. So, sometimes at that stage, in those early levels, there's a lot of lessons to be learned. And so I think that being part of that was a great opportunity for me, and you learn from each one of them, for sure.
Yeah,
we have some big wins out of it that was very exciting, and also some surprises.
That's very cool. I've always felt like the VC world, especially kind of in the health space, now that's where I've landed, would be fascinating. Now, you talked about kind of working with these former classmates. You were providing some guidance. Was your PhD in this arena? What was your PhD about? Was it related?
Yeah, my PhD was in biomedical engineering, was the focus, but my specific work was actually around stem cell biology and regenerative medicine. And if we want to dial into my thesis, it was actually leveraging a patient's own cells to regenerate connective tissues in their bodies. And so there's a couple of limitations around using a patient's own cells. One is the number of cells that you harvest, and when you passage those cells or you expand them, they can change. And this is a big problem in regenerative medicine right now. Maybe we'll get into it. But when you ask cells to grow and divide, you're essentially aging them. And so what is sometimes typical is you have a donor sample that ends up getting split and copied X number of times to treat hundreds of patients, and that is a massive dilution event in the quality of that product and the performance of those cells. And so even when we're working with a specific patient, we were already working on methods and strategies to make sure that those cells, when you do those replication events, you have strategies around minimizing the changes that they endure. And that was a huge part of what we did. And those are important lessons. And that's I think one of the big differentiators that we have at Acorn is that mindset around minimizing the change and the artificial induction of aging when you are culturing and creating these treatments.
What kind of changes are you seeing? Are you seeing, just genetic mutations? Are you seeing, telomere length shortening? Like,
absolutely, all of the above. Yeah. So all of the above, and then also the actual performance of those cells, and actually, like, they almost forget how to do their job unless you keep them in the right state. So there's a number of things that will happen. There's the aging, right? So imagine you take cells and you need to make so many copies of them very, very quickly. You're essentially taking decades of aging from what the demands would be in the human body for growth and expansion, and doing that in a culture system in a matter of weeks, right? So there's some great studies out there. Hartman et al. Did a phenomenal one where they showed that some of these standard practices in how her cells are passaged to create some of these therapeutics today, end up taking cells that would be age 0, or in their study, up to 9 years old. And by the time that process is done, the end product cells are performing at a level between 75 and 95-year-old, right? Wow. Cells. So these things have very lasting effects on telomere length, metabolic activity, performance of the cells, the growth factor and peptide spectrum that is produced and released by these cells. It all changes.
Okay. One kind of retro question. Your PhD was on growing soft tissue. Was that related to trying to fix your baseball injury, or did you just kind of serendipitously land in that space?
So, I mean, my focus was always in, that orthopedic space and regeneration of connective tissues. And that includes skin, hair, it includes our musculoskeletal systems, cartilage, bone, fat, tendons, ligaments, and the like. So I was always drawn to that. It became a little bit of a heightened sense of urgency, I would say, or heightened sense of passion after going through the experience of being on the other side of the table, like wandering through the halls with your MRI CD at ROM at the time. I mean, I'm dating myself, but I'm walking through the halls with that to the next stop to find out exactly how bad the damage is. Do you need surgery? Can you rehab? Is your season over? All of those questions. That's it's not life threatening, right? There's way worse things. But for me at that time, that was my world, right? That was I was trying to become
a pivot, at least.
Yeah, right. I was trying to become I was a professional athlete trying to make it to the next step, right? To jump into the big leagues. And so that was my world. And so it was paramount to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Is there any technology that's right that exists right now that you think would have significantly helped?
I think we have technology at Acorn today that could have potentially changed the rate of healing that I had, for sure.
Wow.
So
that's
at the
exciting,
time,
like frustrating and exciting, right?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's great, right? Because, I watch, my wife and I have 3 boys at home. I think the youngest one is the one that seems to be, thinking pro sports, but the older 2 are very athletic and participating in a lot of sports themselves, right? Understanding that, these things will be available to them, right, in their prime, and it is a pretty exciting prospect. So I'm excited to see these things come to fruition. I mean, right now we're looking at this in clinical trials and study from an orthopedics perspective. It's already live and available in aesthetic medicine for skin and hair, but the same principles applied in orthopedics have demonstrated some very exciting early results in the study. So I absolutely think that we have a greater tool set today than we did, unfortunately, when I was injured.
I had this for a question later, but this is the perfect time. So your sons, they have stem cells stored in, I would guess?
Yeah, Jen and I did our parents, us, our kids, friends and family, right? It's something where if you think about it, this is a biologic health insurance policy. You're taking a copy of you at your best, right? Because unfortunately things only go downhill as days go by. And we're locking it in time, right? We're tucking it away. It won't age another day. And so part of you will be on ice. And so if you're excited about the future of regenerative medicine and what's coming next, right, from these cell-based treatments, it makes a lot of sense not only to do this for yourself, but to spread that message and make sure your loved ones are also saving their cells.
So obviously, we're going to get into why hair and, why you should bank stem cells today. You clearly believe that the sooner the better. Should we be saving, cord blood? I don't think I did with my kids, regrettably, but should I have done that? What's your recommendation in that kind of arena?
Yeah, so I'm a big believer that cells are valuable. We've learned a lot in the last 30 years, which is about how long ago cord blood banking became available commercially. And at that time, it was taking exactly what is called cord blood, right? So the blood component. Those cells are blood lineage, hematopoietic lineage. And so they're a different type of stem cell than we target in bone marrow, fat, or what we do from the hair follicle, right? This new non-invasive strategy. So it's a different cell type. Unfortunately, as time has progressed, the science has not demonstrated as much advancement in the therapeutic uses of hematopoietic cells versus mesenchymal stem cells. And because of that, I think the cord blood has not grown in the level of excitement, and the number of physicians that were working on some of those strategies have moved over. So I think it's like we did it for the older two. We haven't thrown it away, right? We've kept it. Am I excited that they're going to see a use case for that? Less so than their cells that are banked at Acorn. But there is a new strategy with cord blood where you're actually banking cord tissue, and this targets the actual tissue components that have a portion of cells that are mesenchymal lineage. You have to do a dissection, so there's a processing component to this in a clean room in a laboratory. So it's a much more expensive offering, but it is available. But again, it's priced very differently than cord blood banking, and so it's a little bit more out of people's price point. So it's less common to see. So there are ways to get at good cells at the time of that, but a lot of these things is just your ability to react in that moment, and then on top of that, the cost, right? So when we're thinking about this is a prospective purchase, right? So you have to be excited about the future of how you're going to leverage these cells. You're not going to walk out of the doctor's office and say, hey, I look better right now, right? Like that's next step. So saving your cells and freezing them down in itself is a prospective purchase. And so that is a thoughtful purchase. And ultimately, sometimes we miss that window where that window presents itself and we're not in a situation financially to react to it. So for us, we've tried to reduce that hurdle of the cost of actually getting your cells banked. And so, our annual fees to keep them frozen are less than a Netflix subscription, right, on a yearly basis. So we've really tried to make this accessible, and it's not invasive, right? So you're not linked to this one moment in time that you have to react to or have to be prepared for or have to be at a hospital where it was offered, right? Including that advanced version, not just the basic version, right? Which has not proven out to be as useful. So there's all of these questions. And then on top of that, you have to then, have the resources to make that decision. So I think that for us, we want to make sure that this is available at any time. And then that's really what we've done. Create something that is financially more available, and then you can react to and do this when you're ready.
So we're going to get into kind of products that your process already makes.
Yep.
We're going to get into a little bit of like why hair, right? Because people may be listening like hair, like why are we talking about hair and stem cells? So we'll get into that. But since we're so kind of salient at this point, would your recommendation be at what age would you want to take some hair follicle stem cell samples and get them stored at Acorn? Is that like when they're a baby? Because why not? Or is that, when they're thoughts?
Yeah, it's less important when they're a baby. What we see is the hair follicle, head hair, really reach a level of maturity where it is adult size around the age of 12. Okay. So we typically suggest 12 and up as a target window. And so it's a little less urgent than when the child is a baby. Now, our youngest right now is 8, and he did this, probably over a year ago. And when he did it, he was watching his older 2 brothers do it, who are teenagers, and he was not going to get left out. So he's hopped up in the chair third, and we got a good sample. It was a little bit low in cell count just because he had tinier follicles. They weren't fully adult sized yet. And so you can do it. It's just your yield is not going to be as high until they reach around 12, and that's when it reaches an adult size.
Hey, super quick break from the podcast. Hopefully you're loving it. This is a way you can support the podcast and take advantage of a great offer. We're offering 50% off of one of our MCT bottles. MCT is an amazing oil. Add the ESS 60 molecule to it. It's even more amazing. All you got to do is leave a review on iTunes. Send us a notification that you've left that review. We'll get you a coupon code. That'll get you 50% off of our MCT oil and free shipping. Back to the podcast.
Okay, let's get into, so why hair? Like how did you land on hair? And I think anybody listening who isn't kind of aware, It's pretty phenomenal, the reasons behind hair. And if you were going to store stem cells, I can't imagine why you would do it other ways. And maybe you could touch, like, maybe there are some benefits to other ways and costs.
Yeah, absolutely. So banking your cells is not a new idea, right? We've been doing this historically with cord blood. People do it for fertility, right? To save the quality of their cells, their eggs and sperm. And there's been other strategies, including banking bone marrow and blood and things like that. Ultimately, though, tapping into your iliac crest, right, and draining out bone marrow is a pretty invasive procedure that people do not want to endure. It does not tickle, and there are some recovery questions around that, right? So it's
what is the iliac crest? For those who don't know.
It's your hip, right? So it's your hip. So basically, it is drilling into your hip and taking out bone marrow to store, and doing that prospectively when there's not an immediate need for it. It's a very tall ask for somebody. And there's ways to mobilize stem cells. You have to take drugs and mobilize stem cells, and then you can collect higher concentrations from your blood. Again, there's an expense to that. There's you're taking drugs that do those things, right? Collecting hair follicles is by far, and we've tested out those and many, many other strategies, even filtering urine for endothelial cells, right? Everything. The hair follicle is the most accessible source of high quality stem cells, period. Right? So through simple plucking, we can access mesenchymal stem cells from a patient. So I don't know if anybody's ever plucked their eyebrows. I certainly do. Otherwise, I'd look like Eugene Levy. This is something where it is not hard to do, right? And especially when you're going to the back of the scalp where you've got less nerve endings than on your face, it's something that is very, very tolerable. So, and those stem cells in the hair follicle, by the way, those mesenchymal stem cells, they are the same type of cells that we target in our bone marrow. So it's a very high quality. A lot of the work that recognized the value of the cells in the hair follicle, a lot of attention was brought to it because of chemotherapy, right? So when we're thinking about treating patients, unfortunately, that have cancers and using chemotherapy, we're targeting highly dividing cells with that treatment, which include the tumor, also include other cells throughout your bodies, including high concentrations, your stem cells. And we lose our hair and the production of our hair because we have so many stem cells in our hair follicles. They get targeted with these chemotherapy drugs, and we end up losing our hair temporarily until they rebound. So,
and just to touch on that, I think one point when people are starting to go through chemos, they'll actually store red bone marrow, right? They'll actually store bone marrow because of the damage that's going to happen, and then re-put it. I think that's something that I've read or seen before.
It is, and so that was a strategy. Again, you've got a patient that is dealing with, obviously getting a cancer diagnosis, going through a bone marrow tap is not for the faint of heart. Typically, they like to remove a 3-month recovery, so it can't be for everybody. It depends on how fast treatment needs to start. There's a bunch of considerations around it, and it also depends on age. They won't do it on a patient over 65. So there's limitations to it, but absolutely. And so now what we're seeing is an opportunity for patients to be able to do this from plucking hair follicles. And that is a very non-invasive, simple solution. And so it's been I've seen a growing population of people that unfortunately have gotten, diagnosed with cancer. And then one of their actions before starting chemotherapy is to bank their cells.
Yeah, that's a no-brainer, right? Because you literally, you don't have to have kind of an invasive procedure. Wow, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. You can also get them from fat cells, right? Isn't that also painful?
So these MSCs, MSCs are mesenchymal stem cells, are available in bone marrow, fat, and in your hair follicles. There is a big difference between the ones in fat versus bone marrow and hair follicles. And the biggest difference is the environment that they're in fat is oil-based. And so when we look at the cryoprotectants that we use when we freeze these cells, they work way better on bone marrow and hair follicle cells. And unfortunately, they don't have as high of an effect or protective effect because all of the cryoprotectants are water soluble and they just don't mix with the oil component of these fat-based aspirates. And so you have to do a lot of processing to try to remove those cells. It's never pervasive. there are issues around doing that, and so the shelf life in a frozen tank for fat is much shorter than the theoretical indefinite banking that you can do around other somatic cells.
And it's invasive, right? Like
Light touch, and it's invasive. It's not drilling to the iliac crest, but it's still invasive.
Yeah.
And in the world of GLP-1s, not everybody has fat stores that are readily accessible anymore.
Like they're rapidly. You're giving away your stem cells. And your muscle mass. So talk a little bit about the genesis of Acorn Biolabs, right? Because you're doing this research. You identified some technology that could be patented. I can't imagine it's plucking hair. That not right. I can't even actually. One of the benefits to your business is the fact that cryo storage is so well researched, right? Like, so this is not like, imagine if you had to go through that entire path and figure out like, well, now how do we store them and then make sure they work later?
Yeah,
so that was
scientists have been doing this since the 1960s, right? So we've got fantastic data around the ability to preserve these types of cells, and even they've been brought out of these tanks and been alive and viable today. So we've got 60-year longitudinal data to demonstrate that these cells can be banked on one end and come out the other intact.
So what was that kind of initial, and I know your first product is secretomes, secretomes. Is that the first thing? Is that what was patented? Like, hey, we can use this, and how did that evolve, or maybe it was some other technology?
Yeah, so the secretomes is the first application that we have, the first treatment in leveraging your own stem cells, and so that was actually the third wave of our patents. But the first was actually on making sure that this was a scalable solution. And so typically if you wanted to have a sample of your cells cryopreserved, the physician would be referring the patient to a cryogenic site. So you would have to send that patient somewhere else for their cells to get collected and then preserved, because you have to be adjacent to where they're actually going to process these cells and freeze them, because it's a time-sensitive operation. And so what we did is we actually invented and patented a liquid, a media, that has no animal components, no donor human components. It's a very simple transport media that can take your cells and allow them to be shipped across the country. And so we now have days to get them to their arrival location, which allows us to have cells collected from partner physicians in New York and have them shipped across to California, to our central facility. And so that's been a real opportunity to make sure that for these practices and the physicians, they're able to deliver this next generation of treatment and care to their patients. And I think that's important, because the patient is choosing a physician. They trust that physician. They got a relationship with them, and they want to go back to that practitioner to help develop the treatment course and to accomplish what they want. And so we've created a system that allows that physician to do that instead of having to refer their patient out if they want to take advantage of this next generation of autologous therapeutics.
So the business case is like obvious, right? You don't have to fly to go get whatever even if you were pulling hair, getting your hair plucked, you don't have to fly over there to get it done. Now you're able to do it at some local space and potentially at home, although I'm sure you're not doing that, and maybe that's in the works. All right, so that's the first technology, right? So that already has a use case, because now people out of convenience will and can store their stem cells. And then you're like, well, the
second wave was more simple. It was just around packaging and temperature control. So we want to keep the cells at the right temperature during transport. And so we developed some technologies that allowed us to do that at a different level of scale. If you've got multiple patients that you're trying to ship across the country and things, useful, but less exciting. The third one became exciting again, I would say. It's a process patent around how we generate secretome and collect it in a culture step for your own stem cells. And so we take your cells in the lab and we actually grow them. And as they're growing, they release the secretome. So the secretome, the root word there is secretion, right? So secretome, right? So it is all of the things that are released by your stem cells to support the adjacent cells and tissues. So the stem cell's job is really to support that area. And to do so, they release a number of things, including growth factors, exosomes, which has become a bit of a buzzword, matrix molecules, right, to support the space, things like collagen and elastin for your skin, collagen in your musculoskeletal system, right? These things are released in high concentrations by that fibronectin, another element of the matrix that aligns collagen in the right orientation, really important for inhibiting scar tissue formation. Our stem cells release all of these things. We can capture that and continue to capture it over a period of time, so we have mass volumes of it that can then be bottled and delivered back to your physician. And then your physician can combine that through a treatment regime around either skin or hair and try to accomplish the things. So we're really delivering high concentrations of these components that unfortunately diminish as we age back to our skin and hair at physiologically relevant levels to deliver that higher quality healing or higher quality appearance of skin and hair.
So one, you've got these stem cells releasing these secretomes. Like, are they stored in the stem cells? Does the stem cell need any sort of like components to, manufacture these things, or like what does that look like first?
Yeah. I mean, look, it's like a, that joke about a pig can turn an apple into bacon, right? Like that's a magic step. Okay. And that's kind of what our stem cells do, right? They can take sugars and salts and very simple things and create these amazing growth factors and components. So they are machines at doing this, and ultimately being able to harness them and capture these things and deliver them back to you is what that magic of that process is.
So they need some sort of substrate to kind of nourish, and then they're the factory, they're the pig that's kind of excreting the bacon, which is the secretomes. But they do need some sort of substrate to draw components from. Is that correct? Or
yes, it is. Yeah. So you have to put those cells in an environment that supports them, and so we've actually developed that media. It's a very simple media. Again, there's no donor components, no animal components. It's like very straightforward, and it allows there's a number of antioxidant components to it, but it is simple things that end up producing very complex biologics on the other end.
Yeah, through the pig. I love it. That's a great analogy. Our technology is basically like a pig.
First time I've used that analogy, so I hope people like pigs. But anyway,
yeah. So when you're talking about getting this for skin and hair, right? I think my wife actually owns a spa here in Houston, and I think of exosomes. I think of PRP, potentially maybe a little more relevant or more related. How would you compare and well, one, there's some exosomes, and they're your own, right? Made by your own stem cells. Yeah. How would you compare and contrast some of these current techniques that cosmetic people are using?
All of these things that we said might have big words around them, but broken down, they are things that we are already targeting in a med spa or in a physician's office, right? So PDRN, polynucleotides, right, a component of secretomes, that's a target in some of the salmon sperm treatments and some of those polynucleotide treatments, right? That's what they're trying to target. They're just getting it from an animal instead of we get it from you, right?
Not just humans. You,
yes. And that's important, especially when we get to exosomes. But obviously collagens and some things, there's exosomes from plants out there on the market and different things. Not only is it not your collagen, but it's not even human collagen. Plant collagen is completely different than human collagen. We don't accept it. We don't process it. We can't integrate it and get any value out of it, right? The best thing we're going to get out of plants is antioxidants. So I just want to be very careful to say, like, this is not only the right species or the right, but it's actually your own material. And when you get to exosomes, that's infinitely important. Exosomes are essentially little miniature cells, for lack of a better word. They bud off of our cells. And so if you go back to high school biology, if you remember that word phospholipid bilayer, that's the shell or the coating around all of our cells. That coating, when exosomes release these packages, they leave with that same coating. So they have the same shell around them as our cells. And that also takes the proteins that are integrated in with that shell with them. And one of those is MHC complex, which is how our immune system identifies when a cell is our own or when it's from somebody else, and we should attack it and get rid of it. And so with exosomes, there is it's been well documented that these carry proteins on the surface that our immune system recognizes. And so if we are adding these exosomes in any invasive way and exposing our immune system to them, our immune system will identify them as foreign and clear them. And so, topically it may be less sensitive, but as you start to evaluate whether these things are going to be effective in the next generation of these things, either as an injectable in aesthetics or into orthopedics and beyond, it is infinitely important that we have a product that our immune system is not going to react against. One, because it could clear it so we don't get any benefit from it. But secondly, because that inflammatory response can cause its own inflammation, which is not necessarily something that we want at that time. You're introducing something foreign and you could have a negative response to that. And so we've seen this, right? There's been lots of cases of groups outside of North America typically that are jumping the gun on injecting unproven treatments, and people are having bad reactions against them, right? There's a lot of negative effects here. So this is rejection issues around patients not accepting that material.
So it is your own material, and so it's going to be received significantly better. What are some of the, I know that your marketing director, BizDev Dave, he showed me some picture of like a before and a pretty invasive skin treatment, like abrasive skin treatment, and then afters, like talk about kind of what people are experiencing with these with their own secretomes.
Yeah. So I think it's fair to say there's two really things that we're after when we're delivering our own secretomes back to ourselves topically in aesthetics. One is by pairing this with other modalities that are delivering their own benefit, like laser, microneedling, things that are temporarily damaging the skin to make it better in the end. We can reduce the downtime of what you go through to get that end result. And that's in microneedling, that's in laser, that's even in healing after an elective surgical procedure by putting this on scar lines and things. So we're seeing a massive healing difference. And that is important because people want to get back to work. They don't want to have 2 weeks of downtime before they can get back into the office or something and be hiding their face. And so that is actually very important and allows clients to participate in more invasive strategies with their physicians to accomplish the goals that they want to do.
Yeah.
Ultimately, with regenerative medicine, the big promise that we have, though, is delivering long-term improvement of the tissues themselves. And so by delivering back to our skin and our hair our own growth factors, exosomes, the building blocks of our skin, PDRN, and the actual matrix molecules like collagens and elastins, we can improve the quality and the performance of our skin long-term, essentially giving ourselves back our youth. Now that is happening right away. Patients are simultaneously banking their cells and producing their secretome to use it right away. But the magic is that you can continue to go back to that source. Even 30 years down the road, you're drawing upon your 30-year younger self to leverage as a regenerative medicine treatment alongside your goals. So it's an exciting premise. It's been definitely something that has been catching on. I mean, as you said it, we've had a few, really interesting famous people.
Some. I know. I just, in case I knew any additional information, I didn't want to share it. But I'm pretty sure. Well, you share. Like, who might I know that's participated in at least banking?
Yeah, I mean, I get a little scared too because I mean, I don't know which ones of them have shared it publicly, right? I've definitely been there while many have done it, and also seen it. But I think recently there's been a number of people that have been sharing it online. So you just go to Acorn, Instagram, and see a bunch of them that have been sharing it. It's definitely been something that has been exciting to see people engage with it. But I mean, it's not just the beauty of what we're doing is it's not just for the rich and famous, right, and the people with means. This is something that is accessible, we think, to the majority of the population. We've really tried to make it that way. And so the banking of your cells is a starting point. We've made very accessible, whether you want to engage with leveraging them for benefit day one or later on is obviously a call you want to make. But we make sure that everybody can get them frozen down.
So we have these cosmetic applications, and one of the great things for the business Acorn Biolabs is like not only are we intelligently storing, you don't have to fly across the country. I actually visited your facility in Toronto, and one of the things that that Dave, business dev Dave, pointed out was that ours are actually stored, I think, in California because they don't want to cross they don't want to cross country lines in case something gets stuck. You know, you do have your technology has extended the time frame that it can travel, but it's not indefinite, and so it could get stuck in customs. So, I think that already is great. Now, not only do you have a great technology for getting these stem cells stored, but you've got a product that they could use on day one. I have to imagine that's not your end game, right? I kind of have to imagine it's healing your soft tissue damage. Ultimately, what's your vision and potential? And I know there's some restrictions both in Canada and in the US what you can do now. What do you think we're gonna be able to do if lawmakers get into the right frame of mind?
Yeah, well, and it's not just lawmakers. It's our responsibility as well as a company to engage and play within the rules and go through the clinical trials that are necessary to actually prove out their safety and efficacy for patients. And so we're doing that right now. And so we're available topically. That is available today. We are engaged in clinical trials for this as an injectable, both in aesthetics, orthopedics, and fertility. And so those things are ongoing, and we'll be making some announcements around what we're doing there and what our plans are in the future. But ultimately, we have a number of preclinical studies and work that's going on right now in sports medicine and orthopedics, in neurology, in immunology, in endocrinology, right? So these are areas that we are all evaluating how to leverage these cells. And one of the things that I really am proud of our science team at Acorn is we have been able to create amazing relationships with universities and research organizations to collaborate to create solutions to this end. Because after all, what Acorn is really striving to do is become a platform for your regenerative medicine, your personalized regenerative medicine, right? We'll store your cells and hold them tight and take care of them. And we will develop our own strategies that you can immediately use those cells in aesthetics right now and in the future, in the very near future, and other avenues. But anybody can plug into this platform. Right, so any group out there, any company, any hospital that needs a source of you that will then create their own therapeutic to help you with their expertise, they can tap into a younger, more viable version of you. And so ultimately, 50 years down the road, you face something, maybe Acorn has nothing to do with your treatment, but we're an immediate partner with that group to make sure that they have your best younger biology to accomplish the goals that you're trying to do. And so, this is an open kind of opportunity for collaboration. And so we've got ongoing relationships with the University of Calgary, University of Toronto, Mount Sinai Hospital, National Research Council, University of Guelph now, and we'll add them as we continue to progress here, right? We're in conversation with a number of groups in the US right now. So, and we have a relationship even overseas with a hospital in the Middle East where we're working on some next technologies. So this is something where I think that the larger that network continues to expand, the more variety and value we can continue to drive to patients, and that's an exciting future.
And is that all secretomes, or are you also getting into kind of further, maybe stem cell level stuff? Because
the work in patients today is in secretomes, right? But so some of the translational work, but we have a number of applications that are cell-based treatments that are in preclinical testing and evaluation.
So our time is going really fast here in my mind. Like we've covered so much. I have actually so much more, but so I'm going to start honing in on a couple of things. One, better to store your stem cells today than tomorrow, and I know that's a yes. Like that's a yes. Or yesterday than today versus tomorrow, right? In fact, my marketing assistant was there at the biohacking conference, and she was offered to store her stem cells. She's like, "Oh, wait," and like, "No, I don't think you understand. Like, you shouldn't wait. Like, this is better now at 28 than anything else." Is there anything we can do to optimize our stem cells as they're about to get stored, right? Like if you're a dumpster fire on some alcoholic bender and like you've just like it's just a disaster and you store them, is that going to be different than if you've like gotten your life together and you're in a little bit better shape? First off, store them anyway, right? But also, like, are there things that we can do to optimize?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think you're talking about two different things, and they're linked but loosely, right? So your individual health will fluctuate. So you will be times where you're performing better overall and times where you're not performing. And oftentimes those linked to how you're feeling. So that can be your circulatory system, that can be your musculoskeletal system, right? You got some aches and pains or whatever, right? You're dealing with injury, all of those things. A lot of those things are irrespective of your stem cells, right? Definitely like alcoholic benders, and if you're, whatever else, right? Like you're metabolically inactive. Like there's all sorts of things that can affect general health in your cells. All of that being said, you going on a health kick, while you're going on that health kick, and at the end of that health kick, you're still older than you were when you started it. Right? So even the people that are optimizing protocols to slow down aging, right? Like Brian Johnson and Dave Asprey and some of these people that are inventing strategies, right? And are innovating around how to slow down that aging process for themselves and optimize health. They're still getting older every day, right? We have not reversed this. And so you can slow down that process, but you can't, so unless you are literally, a alcoholic drug addict, right? My advice is, maybe get clean, but just bank your cells today. If you do undergo some revolutionary shift in how you feel on a daily basis in your health, sure, go back and bank them again, right? We've made that very accessible to do for patients that want to top up their samples. So I just think that you as a principle, doing this at the earliest possible moment you can is the best course of action.
Excellent. So I did a longevity summit called Uncovering the Secrets of Longevity. I interviewed 50, at this point, 8 experts in longevity, including Ben Greenfield, Dave Asprey, Dr. Stephen Gundry. And I went into it looking for 2 silver bullets. The first one was that little silver bullet that you could swallow and be young, right? Live forever. Didn't find that one, won't surprise you. And the silver bullet that would actually kill you, right? That would actually be the vampire, werewolf, whichever one that would actually kill you. And I think I found that one, and it's related to stem cells. And that is the fact that red bone marrow shrinks as we age, and it is the majority source of our stem cells, the repair mechanisms of our body. Do you have any thoughts on, are there things, and then in my mind, I was like, well, there is a potential solution, which is some sort of dialysis treatment that infuses stem cells into your body, right? So that you're getting some sort of, like, without stem cells, you will die pretty quickly, right? Like in a short time frame. One, thoughts on this concept of red bone marrow going away, and then 2, are we looking at Acorn Biolabs and stored stem cells as the potential stem cell dialysis down the road?
Yeah, so it's a phenomenal question, and absolutely, I believe that in the future we'll be using our own cell repositories to create not only stem cells but even specialty cells on demand as we need them. And this is something that is not going to be a therapeutic where we are necessarily going to be treating any disease. I think it's tough for everybody to conceptualize this, but right now, everything in healthcare, almost everything in healthcare is reactionary, right? Something goes wrong, we figure out a way to fix it and make you better, right? To the best of our ability. But medicine is going to be turned on its head, I think, in the future. And we are going to be doing things to stop from developing that bad moment in the first place. And so we're going to be going from a reactionary system to a preventative system. And so when we go into a preventative system, at that point, then we are going to be developing strategies and engaging with strategies that are going to be maintaining our health as opposed to treating a disease or an illness and staving off of those effects. And so that can be literally combating the effects of aging, right? And I think that a good example of some of the work that we're trying to contribute in that category is in immunology. One of the cell sources that drops off, right, like red bone marrow, one of the sources that drops off very quickly as we age in our immune system is our NK cells, natural killer cells. And so these cells, unfortunately, drop off as we get older, quite significantly. And they're a very unique cell in the immune system where they actually are the ones that recognize our own cells when something's gone wrong with them. Right? As we referenced before, our immune system typically says that's a foreign cell, that's a foreign exosome, that's a bacteria that's wiped them out. Our actual NK cells are saying, hey, that's our own cell, but something's wrong with it. So it needs to be taken away, right? They go to cell jail. And inevitably, not just cell jail, they actually terminate those cells. And those are senescent cells as we age, right? And can be doing extra damage around them to adjacent cells and cancer cells, right? So we probably get cancer multiple times a year, but it never gets past that single cell because they bump into an NK cell and they get wiped out. They never get a chance to grow and divide and become a tumor. As our NK cells drop off, we don't have as many of them, unfortunately, we miss things. And so if we can think about, as we age, supplementing our concentrations of NK cells to maintain teenager levels, right? We now have an opportunity to have a first line of defense against cancer in general and senescence as well. So I think that these are really exciting strategies that we are going to see in our lifetimes that are going to affect massive change, not just in health, but in health care and the way that the system is actually set up. Because this is now adding an option for us to receive boosters to enhance our health as opposed to combat a disease we've been diagnosed with. And in that case, we may never actually face that disease.
Man, paints a beautiful picture. One last question before we get to our wrap up. You talked a little bit about in the beginning that when we replicate these stem cells, they get aged, right? And when you replicate them rapidly, they age rapidly. Are you working on technologies? Do they exist where we can replicate these stem cells with minimal to no aging? Is that because that's going to be really important?
Yeah. So we look at this as a dual prong approach. One, we bank ourselves and lock in age. And the second thing we do is when we actually, the culture system that we've created and patented allows us to collect the secretome between P0 and P1. So we're not having to passage or replicate this cell many times over. We can do this in the very first window before those changes have taken hold. Secondly, we actually have a way that we can recollect the cells that have not divided from your source. And those can be refrozen. You can't do that indefinitely, but certainly it helps preserve your sample long term so that you can dip into it many more times. And that is, I think, a big component of what we have created and have filed patents around, because that is something that really is a best practice, right? A best-in-class practice in how to generate these therapeutics, especially this new wave of secretomes. It is a best practice way to do that, and a best-in-class way to do that, and we're excited to bring that to fruition.
And what exciting times! And then it would always be interesting to have some questions about AI because of the what are you seeing with AI, because that's absolutely phenomenal. But we need to get to our wrap up questions. Okay. All right. So, Dr. Drew, do you have a target age that you want to live to?
I don't have a target age that I want to live to. I want to be mentally prepared to live a very long life. But I don't think that. I think for me, maybe other people, but for me, I think what's healthy is not actually predicting an age.
Interesting. All right, then I won't push you to actually predict one. Darn. Dr. Drew, how long do you think humans...
I say to people all the time when we're having conversations about preparing for these steps, right? Because there's a mental preparation, there's all these different things. I think it's very reasonable and it's very advisable right now that you should be preparing to live to 120 and beyond, right? And so I usually use 120 as an example because that is something that triggers them to just start to think about it differently, financially even, right? Like who's thinking about retirement years, right? In a timeline like that, where I have to make sure that I can afford, right, a roof over my head to 120, right? Like it's a different mentality. And so this is something that I think that we're going to have to make a societal shift around. I think people are going to be going back to school in their 70s at some point because they've got the potential for another career ahead of them, right? These things are going to happen, but financially is the big one that has a immediate potential of having a very negative impact on a lot of people. And so I stress that one. Prepare for a very long retirement if you really want to retire young.
Just the concept that if 120 is what we're prepping for, at 70 you have another 50 years, right? Like that is another career. That is potentially another Nobel Prize winning career. Like it's like some amazing stuff can happen in that time. It's part of the reason I call my podcast the Live Beyond the Norms podcast, because I wanted to be able to encompass some of that stuff, but we'll stick on health and longevity. So I tentatively jotted down 120. How long do you think humans can live?
So that's a huge question, right? So this is the question on whether we have an inherent cap to how long we can live. I don't think that there's a shut-off switch that all of a sudden this is how long. So I think that lifestyle changes, right? So clean drinking water, sanitation, right? Those changes have allowed us to kind of get to this 100-year benchmark of like the upper level or the upper limits of what humans can live to. I think science is going to push through that ceiling and take us to a whole nother level. And that's it. It's going to be different things, right? It's not going to be like the obvious things that just protect us and allow us to live longer. It's going to be actually fundamentally making sure that our biology and our rate of aging is slowed.
So, number
of what the upper
what
potential
can a human live to, right? And I'll tell you, because this might give you, in my mind, it's two numbers. It's kind of like where we're at today, and then where we might be, in 10, 20 years.
So 10, 20 years, I don't know if we're going to be there. I don't think there's a cap. So I think that the human potential is indefinite.
I love it. Okay.
Great.
You said it and it didn't trigger with me. What are 2 to 3 protocols, habits, mindsets, let's call them shortcuts to longevity and a long health span that you would share?
Yeah. So number one, definitively relationships. If this is not just feel good, right? This is well documented. Having really solid, loving relationships with the people around you, you will live longer. And you will influence the ones around you to live longer. And so I think that that's something truly special. And I'm big into family, and I think it's our number one thing for a healthy, long life. Number two, this is super self-serving, but bank your cells, right? You'll never be as young as you are today. Even if we slow down aging, we're still going to wake up tomorrow. Doesn't matter how many sit-ups or push-ups we did. We're a little bit older tomorrow. So let's bank our cells and make sure that we've got a resource for ourselves, because the world of regenerative medicine is moving very, very fast, and I want to make sure that everybody takes full advantage of it. Number three, listen to your body. A lot of people get really busy and they don't take a minute to pause and listen to what's going on in their bodies. Your body will talk to you. It'll tell you when it's craving something, when it needs something, when it needs to slow down, speed up. And if you take a moment to truly sit down and be contemplative, call it meditation, call it a vacation, whatever it is, listen to what's going on.
Excellent. Are there 1 or maybe 2 things that you think people get absolutely wrong regarding longevity and a long health span?
I think we're beyond getting it wrong, but I think it's some of the conversations where it was super hyper focused on just how many years you were going to want to live. I think what the efforts are today is much more on point of trying to maximize our health span. So it's literally the amount of healthy years we live. If we live to 150, but the last 40 years suck, right? Like, who cares? If we live to 130, but the 129 years are awesome, that's the kind of longevity I want.
Yeah, excellent. Dr. Drew, how can people contact you?
You can get me on Instagram, Dr. Drew Taylor. Acorn is at Acorn Biolabs. That's probably where we're most active. And you can also find what is going on at acorn.me, and you can actually find all the different places where you can locate Acorn.
Okay, excellent. And what in the near future are you excited about?
What am I most excited about in the near future? So we have a publication coming out in orthopedics before the end of the year, and I'm really excited for that to drop.
That's awesome. That's awesome. All right. So you can find him, I know on Instagram, Acorn Biolabs. You said kind of directly to you, your Instagram is DRD Taylor. Is that correct?
Dr. Drew Taylor.
Drew Taylor. Okay.
Yeah.
Excellent. And then acorn.me will, I think, have links to lots of different things.
Absolutely.
Dr. Drew, thank you so much for joining us today.
Chris, thank you so much. This has been wonderful. I really appreciate it. Excited to see you again soon.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Live Beyond the Norms podcast. Make sure to subscribe and follow. Also, make sure not to be that guy, the guy sharing this podcast with people who are not interested in living beyond the norms. If you would like to learn more about the ESS60 molecule, the molecule responsible for the single longest longevity experimental result on mammals in history, a full 90% extension of life, visit myvitalc.com. That's myvitalc as in carbon.com.